from Long Island. I had the pleasure of meeting her briefly this afternoon, and she is first adorable and also very astute, I can tell, for such a young age. And I always hear that our Alateens get nervous getting up in front of a bunch of old grown-ups. But I think you'll agree as okay, good. When I assure her that I am completely and totally in awe of young people who survive this alcoholic household and thrive in family recovery. So we're really lucky to have her share her experience, strength, and hope. Avery.
Hi. Oh, well, I am a little nervous, but I just wanted to say thank you for letting me speak. I'm really excited, and here it goes. I guess I'll start with what brought me to Alateen and Al-Anon. I always knew my father was an alcoholic, but I didn't really know what that meant when I was younger because, he was my dad, and that was his main label. And then I guess the other thing was that he was an alcoholic. I never saw him drink. I've never seen him drunk in my life, which I'm very fortunate for. He would binge drink and he would go out and not come home for a day or two at times. And that's basically how the system went. And I mainly knew what it was to be an alcoholic in October of 2006. I was a freshman in high school. My dad brought me into the city because I wanted to hang out with my friends and do what young girls like to do. And my mom was working that night. My brother was in college. And my mom's phone, she didn't have any cell phone service where she was working that night. My dad dropped me off, and it was getting to be my curfew, so I decided to say, where are you? So responsible children check in. So I called my dad, and his phone was turned off, and I thought this was pretty weird. And I tried calling my mom a couple times, but her phone wasn't working. And I was pretty much stranded there for a couple of hours, and it was really scary. And it was the first time that I had really been directly connected to the situation that was going on, or the first time I was able to see exactly what was in front of me. And I was just terrified. And finally, when my mom was done working, I was able to get in contact with her, and we drove around. We live in Riverdale, actually, in the Bronx. And we drove to the train station. We drove to the local bars, and neither one of us had any recovery at that point, so I'm sure everyone here can relate to the 75 phone calls we made to a cell phone that was turned off. We thought maybe he had forgotten about us or something like that, or he was out doing something else. So we basically were just completely frantic for hours on end and screaming and saying, what is he doing? How could he do this? And that was just horrible. And then at that point, that's when things really started to go downward. And I'd like to read an essay that I wrote for college, and I've never shared this with anyone except my college advisor because I absolutely had to. But here it goes. My arms are spread wide open. I'm leaning in for a hug. Instead, I get punched in the face. Each bone is instantly shattered. My nose is bleeding. I cannot open my eyes. I touch my face. It feels hollow. I do not remember how to breathe. I'm told I have to repair all the damage myself. This is how my father's disease of alcoholism has hit me. Alcoholism is shrouded with lies, secrecy, and denial. Many people in America do not believe alcoholism is a disease. Instead, they choose to believe it is about willpower and individual choice. If this was true, one would be able to stop drinking for the love of their family and children. Alcoholism robbed my father of his soul. It selfishly abducted his vivacious will to live life. Most of all, it deprived me from having a dad. Alcoholism has taken everything from my father and left a hollow man in his place. I might repeat myself a little here, so bear with me. I always knew my father was an alcoholic. I never knew what that meant until October of 2006. This was when my father started to drink openly. His inner battle came out within the next few months when he moved out of our house, quit his job, and nearly died on an overdose of heroin and alcohol. The emergency room doctors said he was within minutes of death. Looking back on that day, I sometimes wish the disease had taken his life. It would have saved me from the pain, sorrow, despondency, and immense anger I go through every day when he doesn't call me. Soon after my father's near brush with death, he checked into a rehab center. It was our first Christmas without him. My whole family was desperate for a change. anything to help, and in need of anyone who understood. Fear. It engulfed my life, and I was paralyzed. The uncertainty of what was to come consumed my every thought. Will my father ever come home? Did I cause this? Can I control his drinking? Can I cure him of this horrible disease? The fear and doubt was rooted so deep into my mind, I didn't yet see that each person has considerable power to change their own life if they are willing to use it. I was crushed and defeated by the reality of having a father who grew foreign to me right before my own eyes. Al-Anon, a fellowship of relatives and friends of alcoholics who share their experience, strength, and hope in order to solve their common problems. I crawled into the rooms of Al-Anon waving a white flag. I immediately felt I could be honest and open with everyone in the rooms, but more importantly, I was able to be truthful to myself about the reality and pain that was so apparent in my life. When I first came to Al-Anon, I was going for my father. I did not realize what brought me there was my own higher power and courage within myself. There are many steps involved in recovery. My first hurdle was accepting my powerlessness over my father, his actions, and his drinking. Slowly, I began the process to change myself for me and not anyone else. When I accept that life is solely about choices, I realize that I can be a happier person. I can learn to love my father while detaching myself from his problems. The way I look at life is that every day people are posed with an infinite amount of choices. The only control one has in the world is what they choose to do with their personal free will. Today I choose to let go and let God, while accepting the faith my higher power has offered me. I choose to control my own life and accept my reality. By learning to live and let live, I find it possible to feel happiness regardless of the ill effects alcoholism has had on my family. When I face my fears, they do not become a daunting chimera living in my closet, but something I'm able to control. Faith, perseverance, inner strength, and my higher power. These are the words and tools I live with daily. When I have faith in my higher power, my inner strength allows me to persevere. I believe that everyone has some type of higher power, whether it's a universal icon or an intangible feeling. Not everyone can see their higher power. It takes true strength to quiet oneself and receive help. When I realize I have the courage to listen and accept the wisdom that my loving higher power is offering to me, I am able to achieve serenity in my life. And this is one of my favorite quotes, so I put it at the end of my speech. Courage is fear that said its prayers. So that's what I wrote in the fall, and that was one of the first times that I was really able to open up and express how I was feeling, and I'm really not sure where I would be today with Alateen. In 2006, when my dad had just left, I was on academic probation, and I was not doing the right type of things, hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I was playing the pity card. Maybe if I fail out of school, he'll come back and be my hero and do whatever, and that really didn't work. It just kind of ended up being a pain for me to deal with in the next couple of years. But Alateen has really saved my life in so many different ways, and I have learned so much from the program. The main thing I don't think I really stressed enough in my speech, because it only could be one page, and I really had to cut it down a lot. But the main thing is that I really learned the program is about myself, and that took me a really long time to get. I thought that when I was coming into Alateen, it would maybe bring my dad back to me, or I could do something, or I could learn tools that would help him, and we could talk about recovery and, really make a deep connection there. And I still thought that for a while, and when I learned that he doesn't have great recovery, I'm only able to work on myself. And Alateen has helped me just throughout my daily life. When I'm handling other people, I have much more patience now. I try and be a more considerate person. But as we all know, everyone trips. I still stumble a lot. And, whether I say the serenity prayer or sometimes I can't even get it out without almost screaming it to myself in my head. But it has really helped me, and I still struggle with questions today. The main thing that I'm wondering is, all I want from him at the moment, I don't want him to get a job. I don't want him to come back. I just want answers, and that's mainly what I'm struggling with. I wish that I could know why he doesn't call, and that's what I keep going back to the program for, because everyone in the rooms understands and helps me with what I'm dealing with. And I could not be more happy to be part of this amazing fellowship. It saved my whole family's life, and I'm so honored to be here. So thank you so much.
Wow. I remember what I was like at 17. It was nothing like that. That's pretty amazing. And I want to thank Avery's mother also for bringing her here and helping her. And Joan Lagana, who every year finds me the most amazing Alateens from the Long Island, New York City area. It's really impressive. You're stars. We're still having some problems with cars parked on city, town-owned property, so they are about to tow them. I just want to give you guys one more chance to move your cars. With that, I know that our AA and Al-Anon speakers hardly need an introduction. They were very gracious to accept my invitation to speak after I heard them at High Watch a little over a year ago. I'm really in awe of both of their stories, and it just always reminds me of just how lucky we are to have these fellowships in our lives, which make us family with people whom we might not ever otherwise ever get the chance to know. And even though the circumstances of our lives everybody's life here today are drastically different, we all can come home to the AA way of life, and we can find the most interesting and colorful people as part of our community. So it's people like Sister Rose and Sister Maurice who make me feel so lucky to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we're going to start with sharing her experience, strength, and hope. Sister Rose.
Okay, thank you. I'm Rose and a very grateful member of Al-Anon. Hi. I'm also christening my hat today. It's wonderful to be here. It's really thrilling. I had an opportunity to meet Lois many years ago, and Lois asked me, would I take her to the ladies' room? And it was like handling a treasure. And being here today reminds me of that moment. Well, I'm going to begin at the beginning because I've been told that's a very good place to start. I wasn't raised in an alcoholic home. My experience with alcoholism was very limited. But I know today, if I were to shake the family tree, a few ripe, juicy plums would plop out. The effects of alcoholism ripple across generational lines. And I know my reactions to the disease of alcoholism when I came upon it were of the classic vintage variety. I'm one of those persons, I believe, who was waiting for the exact set of circumstances to exist, for the climate to be just right to set all my reactors in motion. When my best friend, Sister Maurice, developed the illness of alcoholism, all my systems were in go position. And I used to think it was then that I went coasting off on the barge of my own craziness, of scheming, planning, manipulating the life of another person. The longer I'm in Al-Anon, the more I get to know myself, the more I realize that it was my own propensity towards perfectionism. It was my own carefully concealed compulsion to control. It was my own compelling conviction that I was to be caretaker. These were the boosters that propelled me, and I went blasting off into the orbit of mental obsession. And I did what obsessed people do. I counted the drinks. I marked the bottles. I hid the car keys. And I took over responsibilities that rightfully belonged to someone else. There are many lists of characteristics or behaviors by which you can identify an alcoholic. And using some of these, I can best tell you my story. I denied that the problem was alcohol. I knew there were problems, but I rationalized. You see, Maurice and I are both Dominican sisters, but we don't belong to the same Dominican group. She belongs to a group that has its mother house in a place called Spark Hill, New York. I belong to a group that has its mother house in a place called Blauvelt, New York. And I felt a little sorry for her. If she were not fortunate enough to be a Blauvelt Dominican sister like me, she might have to drink now and again. I was puzzled, though, by the changes in her personality when she drank. She loved to quote the Lord Mayor of Cork as he lay dying. She would stand in front of me and say, "Not to those who suffer most, but those who can endure." I listened to that. Sounded open-ended to me. And I was convinced. If it were the crown of martyrdom that was being referred to, I was eligible for all that I was enduring. I saw her change when she drank. From a quiet, shy, retiring person into an overbearing, righteous, obnoxious person. I saw that happen to her. I didn't see quite so readily what happened to me. I was an outgoing, affable, approachable kind of person. And when Maurice drank, I became secretive, non-communicative, and very unapproachable. She had what we call telephonitis when she drank. She used to call me up in the middle of the night, and I would try to hop out of bed on the first ring of the telephone because I didn't want the other sisters with whom I lived to be disturbed by the ringing phone. And I would try to coax her to go back to bed on her end of the phone. Sometimes she would, sometimes she wouldn't. But I could predict the conversation at our breakfast table the next morning. One sister would say to the other, "Did you hear the phone last night?" Someone was sure to say, 2 o'clock in the morning woke me up. And I would stand there and make my face expressionless and say to myself, no one will dare ask me who was on the telephone, and they didn't. I was angry and resentful. It was the custom in my community at that time that whatever alcohol was in the convent was kept in the superior's room, and I was the superior. And I noticed when Maurice came to visit, the supply went down because I did mark the bottles. And after she'd go home, I'd check them out and be appalled. How could anybody drink that much alcohol while I was running up and down to the laundry? So I decided to take the alcohol out of the closet in my room and put it out into a closet in what we call the community room, where the sisters could partake if they so wished. And the next time Maurice came to visit, and she discovered that the alcohol was not in its usual place, and she said to me, "Rose, what'd you do with the alcohol?" I said, "Well, it seems to be disappearing in here." I put it outside, and I'll keep an eye on it out there. And she shook her head sadly. She said, you know, Rose, when they made you a superior, I had such high hopes for you. And I really thought you'd be a good superior. But a good superior would not put temptation into the way of her sisters. I experienced embarrassment. I would invite Maurice to come to school functions. I invited her to come to graduation. And I recall standing up on the stage, calling out the names of the girls who would to come up to receive their diplomas. It was a very important day in their lives, a very important day in the lives of their parents. It certainly deserved my full attention, but I was preoccupied because Maurice hadn't come yet. And with that, I saw the auditorium door back there open up, and she stepped in and she waved up at me. And I said to myself, that's a bad sign. And my thoughts were, I wonder where she'll sit. I wonder what she'll say to the person she sits next to. I wonder how she smells. I experienced fear. Fear for our safety, because she did drink and drive, and I often drove with her. One afternoon, she came into my convent and she said to me, I know I'm going to die tonight, but I don't know if I want to die in the borough of the Bronx, where I was born, or out in Queens, where I've spent most of my religious life teaching. It sounded to me as if a very important decision needed to be made, one that needed my input, and I said, I'll go with you. We went out into the car that evening, and we crossed the Triborough Bridge 5 times because she didn't know where she wanted to die. And before we went over the bridge for the 5th time, she said to me, you can drive. I said, oh, thank God, not knowing she had reached the decision. And we were right in the middle of that bridge when I heard the door on that side click open, and I had to hold on to her with one hand and the steering wheel with the other. So you see, alcohol was taking a toll on my mental and emotional well-being, although I wasn't using alcohol. And then I was filled with false hope. Every time a terrible thing would happen, she would say to me, it will never happen again. And you know, way down in here where you want to believe, I believed. But when I realized that the promises that were so readily made were just as readily broken, I was filled with hopelessness. What's going to happen to her? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to us? There were times I experienced rage. Great rage. I would scream at her, never again will I lie for you. I did lie for her. Her mother would call me up and say, what's the matter with Teresa? You can't speak to her. She jumps 3 feet off the floor. And I'd say, it's report card time. Wait till the report cards are finished. Wait till the parent-teachers meeting is over, and you'll see she'll be all right. But that was a lie, because I no longer believed that myself. I recall standing in my bedroom on the 2nd floor of the convent. I could look out that window and see the corner that the car was to come around. She had promised to come to pick me up, and I stood by that window waiting and praying. Dear God, bring the car around the corner now. Dear God, don't let her have an accident. Dear God, don't let her hurt herself. Dear God, don't let her hurt anyone else. And I stood there praying those prayers until my legs were stiff. And do you know, when the car came round the corner, my prayer was not, thank God. But the white, hot rage welled up inside of me. And I said, how could she do this to me? And I went down to the car door and I threw it open. And I could smell the alcohol. And through my teeth I said to her, what kept you? She said to me, did you have your radio on? I said, no, I didn't have my radio on. She said, now, if you had your radio on, the guy up there in the helicopter would be telling you where the traffic jam was, and you'd know just where I was. Do you know that sounded so plausible to me that I said to myself, the next time she's late, I must turn on the radio. But many times, I stood by that window, waiting and praying in the same way, and never remembered to turn on the radio. And then I was filled with self-pity. When all the painful consequences of the drinking seemed to be suffered by me, what did I do to deserve this? Oh, I know. There must be something the matter with me. How come everybody else I know knows how to pick a good friend, and I pick a lemon? Perhaps if I had had Al-Anon in my life at that time, I would have been able to detach with love instead of wanting to abandon with disgust. But I wasn't able to do that either, because the symptom of my illness that I practiced with the greatest determination was protectiveness. The rescue operations were as compulsive for me as the drinking was for the alcoholic. And as long as I was caught between the advancing illness of alcoholism and my own reactions to it, I wasn't going to get better, and neither was Maurice. Well, the day came when she went off to treatment. And she called me from the treatment facility and she said, I have to go to AA. And I said, I'll find out all about it. I'll get the book. And she said to me, well, you don't have to do that. But I did it anyway. And I went to the open AA meetings with her. And there I met this wonderful man. His name was Martin. Martin used to bring his wife to the open AA meetings. And Martin would meet me at the back door. And he'd link his arm in mine. And he'd say, come on, Rose, we have to sit up front. They say that's where the message is. And Martin and I would come up front. And finally, I got the message that there was a program of recovery for me and that I needed to make changes in my life, regardless of the ones that Maurice was making in her life. And you know that expression we have, you get what you need? Right at that time, I had 2 girls in the high school who were terrible. They had bad attitudes. Every day, the teacher sent down to me complaining about these girls. And I would dutifully call up the mother, pass on the complaint. Well, we broke for school vacation, and when we came back, there was a marked change in these girls. And I said to myself, I've called the mother so many times to complain, I must call her up and tell her, this Catholic education really works. And I tried to do that. And she told me that very little had changed in her household. Her husband still drank, but she believed the change that we saw in her daughters came from the fact that she now went to Al-Anon. And I said, that's for me. And I went to Al-Anon. And what have I found in Al-Anon? A renewed belief in miracles. The self-pity and the resentments can be changed into self-discipline and self-confidence. Faith can replace the despair. Hope can replace the desperation. Courage can replace the fear. And peace of mind can replace that all-pervasive confusion. I've also found in Al-Anon a freedom from illusions. When I admit powerlessness, that's not a confession of failure, nor is it to operate from a position of weakness. But the program teaches me that I have choices and the right to make them, and that it's not my obligation to do for other people what they can and often wish to do for themselves. And that knowledge freed me from the grand illusion that I was to be the great fixer. I tried to keep the focus on myself, and in so doing I've discovered that the defects of character that need my attention are my own. I've also found in Al-Anon a freedom, as I said, a freedom from illusions, but also I've come to the realization that the God of my understanding wants me to have life in all its fullness. And when I use the steps, the tools for change, when I use the slogans, which for me are like lifesavers in the crisis crunch, when I make that conscious contact with my higher power, little by slowly, I become more the person I want to be. Maurice and I have been friends for over 50 years. We've worked together for over 30 years. Each of us is glad the other one has a program. Because it truly has been. Yes, it truly has been the programs of AA and Al-Anon that have helped us to not only maintain our friendship, but deepen it and support it. Many people, knowing Sister Maurice's schedule, say to me, how does she do all that she does? They know of her retreat work almost every weekend for people in recovery. They know of her other service work. And I'm able to answer that question. I know how she does all that she does because she's very faithful to her own program of recovery. A few years ago, Sister Maurice received the Sister Ignatia Gavin Award. Now, Sister Ignatia was a co-worker of Dr. Bob's. And when Sister Ignatia became the administrator of a hospital, she always made sure that there was a bed for the sick and suffering alcoholic. But Sister Ignatia was also a great supporter and encourager of Lois Wilson and Annie Smith in their early efforts to begin the Al-Anon program. And Sister Maurice received that award in recognition of the work that she has done in the field of alcoholism as an educator, as a retreat leader, as a counselor. And it was a well-deserved reward, to be sure, and certainly a day on which I was very proud of her. I would like to close by paraphrasing the words of Ruth to Naomi. In the Bible, there's a section called the Book of Ruth, and it tells the story of Ruth and her relationship with her mother-in-law, Naomi. There comes a point in their lives when all the menfolk in the family have been killed in the wars. And Naomi says to her daughters-in-law, listen, you young women, go back to your own people. You may marry again and have a new life. And one daughter-in-law decides to do that. But Ruth has learned to love Naomi for Naomi's wisdom. And she says words similar to these that I would like to address to my dear friend Maurice, to all our AA friends, and to my beloved Al-Anon. Do not ask me to forsake you, for wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. And your people will be my people. And your world of serenity, my world of serenity. Thank you so very, very much.
You did great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
You all set?
Yes.
Thank you, Sister Lois.